Okay, I got the, this is driver's side, lower control arm, bolted in. I just got one bolt, the rear bolt, holding it in, it's loose, you can see, and moves nice and freely. There is very little play in there. I can't even move it, even though it's not even tight. It doesn't want to move, you know, forward or back. And the front mount is not even attached yet. So here I've got the front bolt in. It's all loose. It's even holding up this front subplane, the subframe. So the entire weight of this subframe, which is, I don't know, 10 pounds, is hanging on the front of the control arm, which isn't even attached to the car. It swings up and down nice and smoothly. Now I just got to mark my holes. Get this plate centered left to right. I put some lockout plates in here that comes with right here. I just put the same one on either side, just flipped it so that it was centered as much as I can get it in the hole. And this is slotted, but really you're not gonna have any adjustment on these 66s. So I gotta mark my holes. The paint is gonna be right here. I had to pull my radiator out so I had room. So problem's gonna be getting some bolts and nuts through this frame part here, because my front fascia here is covering the hole. I don't know, there's a slot in the frame right about here, but I'm gonna have to work out something. So hardest part now is gonna be finding the center of all these holes. I guess I'll just use a, whatever size that is, 7/16 drill bit, spin it up in there to mark them all. I'll clamp it up. So get them marked, they gotta be pretty precise. So I'm back on the driver's side again. I didn't like this, just leaving these top two holes empty. There's only about a 1/2 inch of frame or metal, whatever, between the two. So what I did is I got some bar stock and I cut some more templates, and I'll just bolt it in place and leave it there. It's a 1/4 inch thick. Hopefully it doesn't mess up my camber. I had so many shims in there before that this should be fine. I'd rather have this in there than separate shims on both sides. Right here's my my plate all painted up, and then there's one in place there. This is the driver's side. I don't know if it matters, but you can see where I had to grind just the corner of that bolt off, because otherwise it was going to rub. So, but it didn't take much. Just ground it at an angle like that, so the head of the bolt is still intact. So here's the driver's side put in place. It's just pressed in there. You can see I can't get these top bolts out. When these bottom ones are tight, it's not even tight now, but when these are tight, you won't be able to get these out because they won't slide out. So I may end up grinding one side of that flat eventually. That way, I think it's gonna be a lot easier to do my alignment with shims in there without these top bolts in place. And then when I got the alignment where I want it, then slide these bolts in and tighten them down. Another problem is on the back side with those two bolts like that, it's very hard to hold a nut, the bottom nut on with a wrench. I have to do it from the bottom. That's not easy. Well, maybe it is, who knows. Anyway, a lot of people say they don't want to bolt this heavy piece of steel on the front, and I went and weighed it, and it's 13 pounds. So not too bad. So it can't be much more than the strut rods and the brackets that came off. I'll weigh them separately and see what kind of difference it is. So let's see if I can slide this in here. So there, I just slide into place, and it's just sitting on top of this lower control arm, which isn't even bolted You know, it's only got the one bolt in the rear of the car. So it comes with a bunch of plates, different lengths. They go behind whatever metal that you drilled through, so that you sandwich that metal in between this plate and this bracket, so that they're not putting any stress on just the hole itself. So the easy one is going to be this one in the center, right below the radiator. I'm going to have to make these bolts come down because the radiator's right above it. But these other ones, I'm going to have, I don't know if you can see it, where's my finger? The other ones have to go up, and that's where I have to reach in here like this. I don't know, I can't even get my hand in there. Reach in there, stick a backing plate on there, and then the nut and washer. So, all right, here's a picture from the top. This is the easy ones to get to. The other two go inside this frame rails on both sides. There is access holes in the front, but like I said, it's behind that lower fascia. So I'm thinking I might turn these bolts around, have them come up. It'll look cleaner from the bottom. Not that anybody sees down there but me. And just grind off the top of the bolt if it sticks up too high. My radiator used to sit right down on top of here. There was just like a little foam strip under there. So I'm gonna have to raise it up ½ inch or so, maybe 3/4 of an inch. Hopefully I don't have any hood clearance issues. Just in case you're wondering how I'm getting these nuts up and washers up in there, it's got to go up in here, see? So I tape the nut on the back on my finger, and then I stick it up behind there and twist the bolt from this end, and you can feel it screw on there. I don't know how I'm going to tighten them down yet. So I've got my these, I guess they're the caster adjustment plates, but of course on the 66 they're not really adjustable, so I'm just going to put them in there where there's no binding on the swing arm, on the lower control arm, and I'm lining them up with the notch on the top so I know they're the same, and then the hole lines up. You can see it's offset just a little bit to one side, so I'm just using mirror images from left and right. And they recommend putting one of their washers on the inside. I just added one on the outside just because there's not one there. Again, notch on the top. So here's the kind of fun I'm having. Since I was too lazy to take this all the way off, I had to put a little wrench on the back side of this. I could torque these down. With all the washers on there, the nut just spins. So, and it's not easy. I don't even know if I can get it back off. I don't know if you can see in there how tight it is. Where are we looking at? I can't even line the camera up, it's so small. But that's my little doodad here. It's like a little socket adapter. I can't take it off with one hand. There. It fits in a 13mm. You can put a socket on it. That's as low profile as I can get. Okay, here we go. Driver's side again. So I'm gonna put this, what is this thing called? A spindle. Yeah, okay. So it has a plastic cap on there to protect the the rubber seal, and then a whole stack of washers. I don't think I need any of these, but the instructions do say use a washer under the nut. So I don't know if there's room. I'll put one of these washers maybe. The top one, there's no protection at all on for this. I don't know why they did it that way. I guess to hold on to the little washers. So it should just slide right on there. Oh, one other thing you need too. They come with this little adapter, I don't know, sleeve. This ball joint on the bottom is a Chrysler ball joint. So it's a different size. Different size. So that just slides on there like that. And that'll fit in there so that it fits correctly. Otherwise it's going to slide down way too far. So I'm going to put the top on first, just make it easier. There we go. It should just drop on there, try not to mess the threads up. There we go. All right, these are the final two bolts for the subframe. On this side, they were really close to the frame rail. I think this flange here is not as wide on this side as it is on the passenger side. So when you center this subframe between the rails, these holes are really close. Not a big deal. So I took the backing plate and I had to round it off a little bit so that would fit, because this is kind of curved here, because this is one piece of metal that's bent, and then they weld it together to a flat piece on the bottom. So I had to do that on this side. To be honest, it's not super crucial that this subframe piece is exactly centered in the rail, because you don't really have any adjustment in the back, and that's fixed to the car. So the front is kind of dictated wherever it's going to fall, and it's slotted, so wherever it lands in that slot, technically I could move this subframe left and right ½ an inch, and this piece is still not going to move once I bolt it in with those lockout plates. So after I made sure everything's going to fit, I put the spindle on the other side. Everything works great. So I took the spindles back off so I can grease my ball joints. They come dry. I also had to put in my last Zerk fitting on the bottom ball joint here. I did want to put it on earlier because I was afraid it might get knocked off. And then I'm going to put some grease in here and work this ball joint around. Just try to get it pretty well lubricated. And then I don't want to put too much grease in there, because when the spindle gets tightened down, there won't be any place for the grease to go. So I'll try to get a bunch of air out of there, fill it up with grease, and then I'll finish greasing it up after I get everything tightened down, so I know there's room. Remember on the top one, I had to put that little 45 adapter on there so that I can reach the grease fitting, because you can't do that afterwards. Oh yeah, don't forget to put some grease on the top of this boot also, because the spindle rotates on there and it'll tear this thing up in no time. All right, time to rant. I was greasing up my ball joints. I didn't even finish one ball joint and I ran out of grease. I just filled this up. You use these little cartridges here, don't hold very much at all. Thought it'd be easier to get the smaller one, mini, you know. Anyway, it holds 3 ounces. You can see it's clearly empty. I cleared out whatever was left in the end of it there. But like I said, one ball joint worth of grease out of this thing. So I'm gonna pull this cartridge out and see what's going on in this thing. Again, empty. It's just a tube, right? So should be able to just pull this back and insert the new one. Another $3-4. And that's as far back as the plunger goes. I don't know if you can see it down there. See it? So the plunger is right here. That's where the plunger is, and I can't pull it back any farther. The reason I can't pull it back any farther is because this is all full of grease. The grease squeezes past the plunger because it's a terrible seal in there. You can see it's actually starting to come out in there. Let me pull a little harder. Look, it's coming out the end. Yeah, it's making a huge mess. And if we look down in there, I don't know if you can see it, but it's starting to ooze past. So I'm gonna have to pull this back all the way to get that grease out of there. But you know, I'm not even gonna use this. I just want to scavenge that little bit of grease out of there. I ended up buying a full-size one. Hopefully this is better. It's still made overseas, just not made in China. So don't buy this. I don't even know if I want to show you the name. Hopefully you didn't see the name. I don't want them to just change their name on Amazon and sell the same thing with a different sticker on it. What a joke. Okay, I don't know if you remember back when I did the upper control arm, I had to replace the Zerk fitting with this 45 because there wasn't enough room to get a grease fitting on the grease coupler connector, whatever it's called, onto the end of the Zerk fitting because of the way the ball joints a little recessed in the control arm. So I replaced that out with this. And then when I got to the lower ball joint to put that in, this is the fitting that came with it. And you can see how different that is. There's like a very fat shoulder right here. And that's where your connector clamps on. I don't know what you call it, the coupler, grease fitting, whatever. That's where it clamps on, and there's not enough. It's like, it's so thick right here compared to what the other one looks like. And I have a locking jaw clamp, whatever you call it, that locks on there, and it won't lock on this at all. So it locks on here very tightly. I ended up not even using that one either on the bottom one. This is what came in my box of, this is what came in my box of spare grease fittings, and you can see how pronounced the shoulder is on there. So the jaw clamps on there good when I'm putting the grease in. This one, terrible. So, and I thought maybe that was just a bad fitting, you know, like a dud. But here's the one from the other side, and you can see they're both the same. They're just terrible. They're very, very rough. You can see how roughly finished they are. I guess they're just a defective batch or something. So, not a big deal. Okay, I'm trying to do a rough alignment here before I get too far along. So I measured the rear track, made sure that the tires were centered and they were like within a 1/16 of an inch. That was close enough. And then I transferred that measurement to the front. I made sure that I'm centered on the frame. I measured off of my control arm here and made sure I was equidistant on both sides. So this line is the rear track. So this line is parallel. And then what I did was I just put a square here against the spindle and then clamped another square on. I know this isn't exact, but this is going to get me pretty close. I just want to make sure that my spindle is perpendicular right here. So I'm perpendicular, so that way I had to loosen up my tie rod, just that. But now I can measure my camber. Okay, just to get a rough measurement on my camber, I can set this on right on top of the spindle. You can see I'm getting 0.68 degrees, and it's leaning in, so that's negative, that's good. And if I just put it flat against the backing plate, 0.64, 0.7, you just have to hold it steady. So I think that's pretty good, 0.7 degrees, negative camber. So hopefully I can get something similar on the other side. I'm not using any shims. I just have that 1/4 inch plate in there that I'm going to put the extra bolts in. So pretty good so far. Okay, I'm measuring caster on the passenger side. So I have my wheel turned 30 degrees to the right, measuring off the spindle there. And I've zeroed out my gauge. So now I'm going to turn it the other direction to the left, 30 degrees. It'll be a 60-degree swing, and I'll get my caster reading. All right, here's the new shock and spring. Need to put some anti-seize on these threads, and also on this bearing that goes right there. Put anti-seize on that too. And so I wasn't sure if it made a difference how the spring was clocked in there, where it fits up against the spring perch in the shock tower. But you can see it's only flat from here around to here, so this part here isn't actually touching anything. So the top of the shock tower has a flange on the front and the back. It's about 3 fingers wide like that, and then another one over here. So I'm just going to clock this so that this part here is in between them, so that the flange is grabbing on where the flat part of the top of the spring is. I don't know if it makes a difference or not. Putting it in, I tied a string to the top of the shock to help guide it up through the tower. And otherwise it's a piece of cake getting it in there. And as you can see, other people have said the same problem. This is as far as the shock comes up without compressing the spring. So I'm gonna have to jack up the control arm. I'll probably jack up from the bottom of the spindle right here or so. I need to raise it up about 1.5 inches, and then I can put this pin in there. I'm not gonna use these bolts because I'm just gonna use the bolts that I have that screw right into the shock bracket. Here I used a spark plug socket and just a little clamp to squeeze that shock mount through the top of the bushing. This is just some kind of hard rubber plastic bushing, and it doesn't take a lot of force. And then when that gets all the way on, you put the second clip on there. There's a clip on this side and a clip on this side to keep it from sliding out. So the groove that this clip fits on is still underneath of the bushing a little bit, because you have to compress it in there. So I'm just going to put my socket back on there and push it on and see if it snaps in place. Okay, this is the passenger side. Just for fun, I put that the shock on there without the spring, so I could check the movement of all the suspension components. And right now I have it pushed up against that bump stop as high as it'll go. And if you look on the top of the shock, you can see that not even near the top of the travel of the shock. It's about 2 inches away. And that shock only has about, I don't know, 5 inches or so of travel. So I'm not getting very much of the travel out of there. So I did a quick search on a shorter mount, a shorter bracket, and I haven't seen anything, but it sure be nice to get some more travel. And what that would do also is lower the suspension. If I could drop that down 1 inch or so, because on this side, here's the driver's side all buttoned up. This ride height right here is within 1/2 inch of where I was before with the stock springs sitting on the tires. And right now I'm not sitting on any weight at all. This is just as low as the suspension gets. So you can see right here, here's my control arm, and here's the bump stop. So this is 5 inches. That's it, 5 inches of total travel. So I don't know if that's a concern or not, but it just kind of concerns me. They say don't let the shock top out. You know what happens when you go over a railroad track or something and the front end bounces up. So we'll see. Just keep plugging away. Oh, also I need to tighten this up. This is at the lowest. And it says start off about 1/3 of the way up the shock. So when I pull the other one off to put the spring on there, I'll measure it so I know how far 1/3 is. I should have measured it ahead of hand. Okay, just some more observations. When I had this on the car and I raised the suspension up as high as it would go, I was measuring 2 inches right to there, to that part of the shock mount, the top of the shock, whatever. The whole space there is 4.5. So subtract 2 off of that, and that gives me 2.5 inches of travel. That's really all I'm using. Now this is the shock mounts in the center, roughly in the center of the control arm. So the end of the control arm moves about twice as far. So that should give me 5 inches of suspension travel. And in fact, I measured it, lowered it all the way down as far as it'll go. This is 15 inches, and then raised it up all the way I could get till it hit the bump stop, and then it was 10 inches. So I am getting 5 inches of suspension travel, which I don't know, it doesn't seem much to me, but we'll keep going. Anyway, I raised the adjustment nut on the shock all the way up, and 3 inches is the travel you get. So they recommended starting 1/3 of the way up, so I'll just leave 1 inch on the bottom as my starting point. Okay, I'm sitting on the ground. All the weight's on the tire. It is definitely sitting a lot lower than it used to sit. If you look down here at my oil pan, I used to have 6.5 inches of clearance for that oil pan, and now I have just under 4. So it's dropped at least 2.5 inches. That's kind of shocking. And also I've gained a lot of negative camber. I don't know if you can tell because it's kind of blurry back there. Just over -3 degrees. I think before I had about 1, less than 1. So I've gained a lot, I guess. When I did it, I had this suspension with the spindle was lower than it is now because that's where I was originally. So the spindle is sitting 2.5 inches up higher. So that's going to change some. And also there's weight on the suspension. So I'm guessing I'm going to have to put some shims in there. Give me some more, take away some of that negative camber. So previously I said that I was concerned about my shocks topping out because I didn't have enough suspension travel. So I looked up the shock top mounts for 67 and 68, and they appeared to be identical except for they're shorter in height. So you can see how much shorter they are. So what Ford tried to do was save some money when they went from 66 to 67, and even though the shock towers got a little taller, they wanted to use the same shock, so they just made the mount shorter. So these are pretty cheap. Ordered these off eBay. Unfortunately, it's coming out of China. These parts come with metric threads for the bolts, so I couldn't use my original hardware. I didn't want to put any metric bolts in there. That seems silly. So the kit comes with these 3/8 inch hardened bolts. Pretty good. Of course, they weren't going to work with this because they come with a little capted thread on the back. So what I did is I just drilled this out with a 3/8 bit. And this is only a 5/16 bolt anyway. And there I have one mounted in place. I had to mount it to the shock before I bolted to the shock tower because I can't get a ratchet underneath there. There's no room to hold that nut on the back, and you can't reach in here. So that worked okay. So now I'll just bolt that up in place, and then I can get a comparison side to side how much downward travel on my suspension I gained. Okay, this is the driver's side that I put the 67 shock top mount on, and you can see I have a little more than my hand width on there. And let's go to the other side. So this is the side with the stock shock top mount on there. You can see I have a lot less room. So I'm pretty confident that the shock won't top out on that side, so I'll just do the same to this side and we'll be good. It should be more in the usable range of shock travel now. Okay, here's my setup I'm using for getting a rough alignment. I have a string coming off the back tire down to some jack stands in the front, and I have a wooden rule going under the car to some squares. So I'm at 68-inch rear track, so I just move the front jack stands out so that I get 68 inches at the front. You can see my tires don't, my track's not as wide in the front, so I can't just lay right across the tire. So once I have those two strings at 68 inches, I make sure that I have the same distance either side off my rim. That way I'm pretty sure these two lines are parallel. I measured several times, both sides, slide them back and forth until I get the same reading here as I do on the other side, and I'm at 68 inches from the front. So once I did that, I put some tape lines on the bottom. One is just parallel to the wheel when it's straight. The other two are at 20 degrees each direction, left and right. I'll tell you why he's 20 degrees in a minute. And then I set my camber. First, I have about -1, a little less, maybe -0.9 on both sides. Using those shims is a pain because you got to take them out, put in a different one, tighten everything down, drop it back down, measure it. It's a real pain in the butt to do. So, and I did my caster. To measure the caster, I'll put the mathematical equation in the description, but basically you measure the camber with the front tire pointing out, 0 at your gauge, and then turn the wheel in the same number of degrees, and that difference is your caster. So the reason I use 20 degrees, that's a 40-degree swing. Using the calculation, I just multiply that times 1.5, and whatever reading I get, that is my caster. So I tried to get the caster above 2. I didn't want it too high because I have manual steering. So I got it between 2 and 2.5 on both sides. That's about as good as I can get right now. I'll drive around a while, things settle a little bit, and I'll just go remeasure it. So, and my toe in, last thing I want to do is toe in. So I have my little micrometer. What I do is, or caliper, sorry, not a micrometer. So I measure on the back and zero this out. So I'm just barely touching the string right off the rear of the rim. I zero that out, and then I just add 30/2 of an inch and make sure that the front is that. And then I screw in my tie rod adjuster till I get it just right. So I want the front in farther in 1/32 more than the rear. If I do that on both sides, I get a 1/16 of an inch toe in, which should be perfect for me. Also, before I did measure that toe in, I tied off the wheel so that it can't spin around. Just doesn't have to be super strong, just so it doesn't move. So there you go. So it's time for the rear shocks. These are the Viking. Well, let's get the number off there for you real fast. You can see Viking B218. I think it's 64.5 up to 68, maybe. Anyway, there's what the shock looks like. There's a adjustments. I'm not going to adjust this until I get them in the car, because then it's really hard to get that piston in and out. So I wasn't sure if I could get the old shocks off without taking out the rear seat, but apparently you can. There's the plug there, you can see it up there. That's the back of the seat. So this is the first time I've had my trunk liner out, and it looks pretty good under here. I did see some surface rust here. Apparently some moisture got in the trunk at one point. I'll have to get some kind of spray converter or something to get off there, I don't know. Tricky part of getting this one in is when you push it up through that hole, you gotta have somebody put a nut on the end while you're holding it. So I don't have somebody unless I go grab my daughter out of the house. So I'm gonna see if I can push this piston up so it gets sandwiched in between the two mounts. And then I can climb up top and put a nut on there. So make sure you put that bushing on there first before you put it up in the hole. Always play safe. And then you can see there's two different diameters of this bushing. You want to use that big end so it doesn't flop around in the hole. So there's the big end there on the top. And then when I get it up there, I'll put this on the bottom before I put it in the bottom hole. I don't know how I'm going to do this in one hand. This ain't going to work. I can tell you right now. Good news is once you put the rubber bushing on there, it's kind of tight, so it holds the washer on there so it doesn't fall off on you when you're trying to stick it up there in the hole. All right, and then somehow I got to reach up there. I don't think I can do it because I can't reach up there. I'll be. I think I did it. Let's go check the top side. Click. Go to 6 and 8. 6 on the compression, 8 on the rebound. In the front I did 8 compression, 10 rebound. So a little softer in the rear. All right. There you go.